This video is round 2 with Mr. Lee Strobel regarding the authenticity of his claims in the book A Case for Christ. And stay tuned and I'll show you how he uses an analogy in his introductory chapter, which actually completely contradicts his own methods. This is the second episode in my quest to debunk Lee Strobel, author of A Case for Christ. I was about to go into the actual interviews themselves with Lee Strobel, the scholars that he so-called investigated, which led him to his conversion to Christianity, specifically evangelical Christianity. But as I was perusing YouTube on a few of the atheist channels to see what their take was on certain topics, one creator named Steve CHIVES caught my attention with this 40-minute video debunking the case for Christ. Link is in the description, because he picked up something in the introductory chapter that I didn't pick up on even though I read the book twice, first and second edition. Lee Strobel makes an analogy between an old court case where everyone thought they knew the evidence and uses this to explain his mindset methodology while conducting these investigations for the resurrection of Christ. And Steve CHIVES shows that this clever analogy actually defeats his own case. The old court case was regarding a man named James Dixon. Dixon had a long criminal record, and one night the police were called for a domestic dispute of some sort. The officer who responded ended up in a grappling match with Dixon and supposedly got shot with Dixon's .22 caliber pistol that was found tossed in the bushes after the fact. Well, it was found out later that the officer shot was carrying a pen gun in his front pocket, which had actually discharged during the tussle. And that officer, who had received a Medal of Merit, not only lost that but was fired from the force, as he should have been. And Lee Strobel's point to all this in his analogy was that you have to keep an open and clear mind, or you may miss or ignore possible evidence to prove your case. And there were 4 major quotes in this introductory chapter that he used as the loading of prior ammunition for his upcoming interviews in the book. And the first quote, using James Dixon's case as an example, was, "Evidence can be aligned to point in one direction." Yes, Lee, exactly. And when you take 14 interviews and 12 of them are fundamentalists, you are potentially lining evidence to point in only one direction. When you interview detractors from the Jesus Seminar in the 1970s, but not the members themselves, you are leading evidence in only one direction. When you take at face value whatever the evangelist scholar puts in front of you, and you don't follow up and fact check to see if it's accurate, you are lining the evidence to point in only one direction. You are doing the exact same things that the law enforcement machine was doing to James Dixon. And the second quote was, "One reason the evidence originally looked so convincing to me was because it fit my preconceptions at the time." Yes, Lee, like every evangelist scholar that you interviewed. I'm going to give a quick example that will be in my coming episode regarding the interview with Craig Blumberg. Dr. Blumberg stated that we have evidence that the Gospels were accurate because around the year 100 AD, there was a bishop named Papias who stated he had met personally with John the Apostle, who confirmed that the Gospels written by Mark, Matthew, and Luke were accurate. What Dr. Blumberg didn't say is in the actual few fragments we have of Papias' writings, the actual writings that came from him, his preface clearly states that he had never met directly ever with any of the apostles. His claims to have known John came from the writings of another bishop decades later. And this is what evangelists do, and this is what Lee Strobel did. He takes all the possible, not definite supporting evidence from all the fundamentalist interviews and states them as conclusive for the resurrection of Christ, but doesn't fact check them, and then doesn't even look for non-supporting evidence. This is why I accuse him of not being an atheist when he did the interviews, because it's so obvious that whatever they're telling him, he just accepts at face value. Because if he studied all the objective evidence in various books like he said he did at the very beginning of his book, The Case for Christ, he could not possibly have come to the conclusion that what these guys were saying served as definitive proof. And this largely goes with his third quote in the introductory chapter, where he says, "Looking through those lenses, all the original evidence seemed to neatly fall into place. Where there had been inconsistencies or gaps, I naively glossed them over. And throughout his book and all his interviews, he is naively glossing over all the counter-arguments to his interviewees. And he continues to follow with his fourth quote, "But when I changed those lenses, trading my biases for an attempt at objectivity, I saw the case in a whole new light." Lee, you're not changing lenses, you're wearing glasses made of one tint. It was necessary to look at every possible explanation for James Dixon to go free. Only an informant brought to light that that officer had a pen gun that he kept in his front pocket. And then it was investigated and found that that was indeed the culprit. If Strobel used the investigative methodology that he did with his interviewees on the James Dixon case, he would be only looking at that one side of the story, where Dixon's gun was thrown in the bushes, an unfired gun, which was tossed simply because he was afraid he would be caught with it. Or maybe Dixon thought the gun went off in the tussle. But they had to pursue the pen gun theory in the officer's pocket to clear him in the end. Strobel is not pursuing the skeptic's theory. He is not looking at the counter-arguments. He is not interviewing objective scholars. He is interviewing evangelists, fundamentalists, people where we can prove time and time again, just like the settled court cases that prohibited the fundamentalists from entering creationism into the public schools, it doesn't matter how much evidence you put in front of them or how much you show the severe lack of evidence for Christ's resurrection, they simply will not believe it because they're fanatics. And fanaticism will trump all prior accolades, education, and expertise if the fanatic constantly ignores what doesn't fit his worldview. So actually, Lee is doing every single thing that was wrong in the Dixon case. He has tunnel vision, he's aligning his evidence to point in only one direction, he's ignoring inconsistencies, and the fact that much of what his interviewees state is regarded as not accurate at all by other scholars. Now, Steve Shives has a 40-minute video where he gives a very good overview on how he debunked the entire Case for Christ book. But me, I'm gonna go through interview by interview. I've already got the research compiled for the Craig Blumberg interview, and I can tell you when that video comes out, you're gonna see he does exactly what he says you shouldn't to remain objective. So go ahead and stay tuned to this channel, because by the end of the creation of this playlist on Strobel, it's gonna be concrete clear that this man was not an atheist when he was interviewing for his book, The Case for Christ. But if you'd like to read a book that is admittedly fiction, check out my novel, The Second Fall, a story of an offbeat apocalypse, sure to offend the fundamentalist. On Amazon, see the link in the video description as well as the banner. And don't forget to smash that bell and sub so you can be here the next time we use the sword of reason and reality to once again thrust into the heart of ignorance.